Welcome back to the long winter and short spring of 1937. A world depression has changed a world, bringing extremes to the right and to the left, both opponents of the democratic ideal. But America, too, has been altered economically, politically, and permanently. We are more confident than we were 1 year ago. They call that recovery. We may never be as confident as we were 10 years ago. They call that truth, another consequence.
In 1937, Guglielmo Marconi, one of the pioneers of radio, died, not knowing all he had wrought. I went around my dial the other day and got soft rock, hard rock, Mozart, some news fragments, a guy talking to a woman from St. Louis, and another guy talking dirty. I dare say you'd find much the same thing on your radio, maybe Mandrell instead of Mozart. In the winter of 1937, the radio wasn't like that at all.
Hi-ho the radio, 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 hi-ho the radio. The radio to you.
The makers of Chase and Sanborn Coffee present Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy.
From Hollywood, California, the Hotchkiss Packing Company presents the Marx Brothers.
The makers of Post Toasties, the wake-up food, present Joe E. Brown.
To you who crowd our theater on Hollywood Boulevard tonight, and to you unseen millions the nation over, welcome to the Lux Radio Theater.
In 1937, the best entertainers in America came right into your home live. You couldn't see them, of course. Maybe that was just as well.
Hi-ho the radio, it's time to take a pill.
Your best friend wouldn't tell you.
No, but some announcer will.
The big broadcast of 1937.
If you simply had to see radio stars, you could go to the movies.
The snow was piled up in drifts 10 feet high.
Say, that other fellow was no actor at all.
No.
But he's much better than this fella.
Yeah, quiet. 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 I wonder what would have happened if you'd asked for noise.
Noise?
Noise!
Noise.
Happy New Year.
About 20 million people every week tuned into the Major Bowes Original Amateur Hour. 20 performers were culled from 10,000 applications every week. They got $10 and a free dinner.
Stand by. This is it.
Good evening, friends. Now spins our weekly Wheel of Fortune. Around, around she goes, and where she stops, nobody knows.
Without a soul.
All you needed was a bus ticket and a banjo and a lot of good luck. Wonder what the other 9,980 people sounded like. The Major also employed seasoned veterans to make sure of an entertaining show. Over the radio, you couldn't tell a real amateur from a ringer.
Gentlemen of rank and position, why your nose is covered with rotten liquor and your mouth reeks with baldy kisses. Vanity and stupidity written all over your face. The only decent thing about you all is your hats.
Eddie Lawrence used a variety of names and voices. He was on the show a lot.
The next week, they'd announce the winners. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Guy goes on, he tap dances on 1 foot over the radio, and he wins. I don't understand that at all.
Major Bowes Amateur Hour. Your vote, please.
The public chose the winner by phoning in votes, sometimes as many as 30,000 in 1 week. Some winners and finalists went on the road in variety shows, booked, of course, by Major Bowes.
If somebody's father belonged to a big club in L.A., everybody would call up 10 times and you'd win. I always came in second or third. I was there when I was 14. I don't mind. It was working. I think we made $100 a week or something on the road, or maybe less.
Time that survey of all the world must have a stop. And alas, the minute hand indicates the stop of our brief togetherness.
With radios and taxi cabs, the driver's life is sweeter because it makes the passenger forget to read the meter.
Radio was there. It was the medium. The mystery shows were great on the radio because you could imagine horrible things.
Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? The shadow knows.
Great thing was Saturday on the radio. Saturday. Every Saturday they had the orchestra remotes.
Radio sold the sound of this music. Radio sold the records, the record players, and the rhythm. It was a music that spoke of confidence, had a kind of American beat to it, gave you a downright American kind of feeling when you heard it.
What do you call that music?
Well, that's the kind of a swinging music.
And a swinging big band was nothing but a whole bunch of different people all playing the same song at the same time, only different. All you needed to lead a band was talent, and a band, Artie Shaw had both.
The music that we were playing, that bands like mine were playing, the so-called, what they call swing music, which is a misnomer. Swing is a verb. It was jazz, big band jazz, and if it didn't swing, it wasn't jazz. They danced in a very interesting way, and sometimes they danced so well in tempo to what you were doing that they caused a series of vibrations between the dancing and the band, the dancing. It was a feedback situation. It could be pretty remarkable at times. It was a pretty crazy period musically.
That manic energy came from the times as much as from the music, which came from jazz, which came from black America and didn't always swing. Goodman got Lionel Hampton. We got good vibes. What did Hampton get?
I had a chance to advance myself in music and play with top people. Benny Goodman. Harry James was in that band. He played trumpet in the band. Gene Krupa playing drums with him at that time. I've always been asked how you felt when you was playing with a white organization. It was a great joy playing with that famous band. We got top pay. We stayed in top places. And maybe that's the privilege of playing with a white band and playing with a leader that was concerned. Benny Goodman was. He was very concerned about us. He always thought that we got the best, not only economically, but socially, too. He deserved a lot of credit. People socialized, listened to music, and didn't have no idea of who was black or who was white. They just enjoyed what they was hearing. The music really did. Music was the tool, weapon for integration.
Only if you were tone deaf to what the rest of society was saying, which most band leaders that winter were not, including Artie Shaw.
The difficulties of going around the country with a black person in your band were almost insurmountable. You'd come into a town to play. The band would check into a hotel. The black guy would have to get into a cab and go down to so-called black town and try to find a colored town, Negro town, whatever it was, try to find a place to live. The same thing when we could finish work. We'd go to a restaurant, stop at a little all-night cafe somewhere, and the one black person would go in. They wouldn't feed him or her. And we'd say, all right, we'll leave. That didn't matter. The guy'd say, go ahead. It was a big problem. And it had nothing to do with music. On the bandstand, I'll see that you get equality to anybody else. You'll be equal and even with everybody in the band. I run that little world. Off the bandstand, I have nothing to do with it. I'm not the emperor of the USA. So it was tough.
Democracy, our favorite song, even if we knew the words better than we played the tune. Meanwhile, in another country, another group of people were trying to sing what might be a song of democracy, but many of us here thought it didn't sound right. Or else maybe we didn't hear it at all. You know, when you're listening to swing, it's easy to miss the faint strum of a Spanish guitar. Come back to the long winter and short spring of 1937 and the sound of fascism set to a Latin beat.
Our World will be right back with Long Winter, Short Spring, 1937.
Dear Serts, when Barney told me that the new dispatcher took me off night flights, I couldn't wait to thank him.
Only Serts has fresh flavor and medicine to keep your breath face-to-face fresh. Serts and sugar-free Serts.
When you're allergy sensitive, your next attack may be only a breath away. For relief, depend on Benadryl. Doctors have prescribed it more than any allergy medication ever. Benadryl from Park Davis.
You're
listening to Children of Japan. This joyous and beautiful sound comes to you from Delta Airlines, because Delta is flying to Tokyo, gateway to the Orient. Come with us to a land steeped in tradition, yet as modern as tomorrow. We'll fly you to the gracious charm of the Far East with all the comfort of the familiar West. Delta to Japan.
When you use the AT&T Long Distance Network, you can enjoy a relaxing conversation.
Hello, Planet Chaos.
Over the last 3 years, AT&T has lowered prices 30%.
I hear you loud and clear.
Lower prices, another way we're reaching further to bring your world closer.
I'm so glad you called. You're the first Earth person I've talked to all day.
AT&T, the right choice.
On the Disney Sunday movie.
That boy's all I got, Bill.
2 children hunted in a hostile land. A horse was their only hope.
Giant and kill for a horse like that.
Bruce Boxleitner, Jack Elam in Louis L'Amour's classic Down the Long Hills.
Sunday.
The second time that some Americans found themselves fighting a civil war was in Spain in the winter of 1937, after the elected government was challenged by the unelected government, the armies of General Franco. Were they freedom fighters or communist dupes, those Americans who went there to fight? And just what were they fighting for over there? Maybe some took along a Spanish dictionary. Spain being so foreign and, well, so different from America and all. Liberty. Libertad. Republic. Republica. Dictator. Dictador. What were they fighting for over there? Wrong question. Right question, what were they fighting? They were fighting fascism before it was popular to do so, or as they say in Spain, popular.
By the winter of 1937, General Franco had been in rebellion against the Republican government for 6 months. He was strengthened by Europe's fascist governments. Italy's Benito Mussolini sent about 45,000 soldiers to fight in Spain. Tanks and artillery as well. And the Führer of Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, furnished Franco with armor, aircraft, and 15,000 men. Joseph Stalin sent arms and communist organizers to the loyalists who held the purse string and held the major cities. But they were a mixed bag of socialists, communists, anarchists, and Republicans, just now putting together a real army. They quarreled among themselves, but they were the only democratically elected left-wing government in Europe that was standing up against fascism. The United States, bound by the Neutrality Act, could not and did not take sides officially. 2/3 of the Americans polled that winter were neutral. The Catholic Church in Rome and the United States favored Franco's fascist rebels. The Spanish government was violently anti-clerical. But Americans who were pro-Republican outnumbered Franco supporters 2-1, and a lot of them were willing to go to Spain to prove it. Abe Asheroff was 21 years old.
It became apparent that Hitler and Mussolini had joined that war on the side of Franco, and that it was no longer a question of a simple civil war between Spaniards. Hitler was the epitome of all the things I've been fighting against all my life. And to become involved in Spain was just another step in the direction which my life had been going.
Americans had raised money for the Republicans, had sent food and medical supplies to Spain. Now they were sending fighters. Milt Wolf, also 21 years old, was a garment worker.
I was involved in raising money for the Spanish Republicans and sending stuff there. And so when the opportunity came for Americans to volunteer, I sort of put my ass where my mouth was and I went.
In all, about 3,000 Americans would go. For no money, no medals, precious little glory. There were nurses and cooks, hardcore communists, romantics, intellectuals, and a lot of tough guys with blue collars. The fighters were the Abraham Lincoln Battalion, and they were in for a long winter. Union organizer Charlie Nusser had left a tannery job in New Jersey.
We drove down to the border in a bus, and the French guards said, "Where are you going?" And we said, "We're going to Spain." And they said, "What for?" And we said, "We're tourists," and everybody laughed, and a few of them gave the salute. And we went over, and the next day the border was closed.
When neutral France and Portugal refused to pass them through, the volunteers had to enter Spain any way they could, which could mean crossing the Pyrenees in the dead of winter. All told, about 40,000 foreigners came to Spain from 25 countries, Slavic-speaking volunteers from Eastern Europe, anti-fascists from Italy, French, Belgians, and the anti-Nazi Germans of the Telman Brigade. And of course, the motley Americans of the Abraham Lincoln Battalion. Bill Wheeler had been a truck driver.
We were pretty loosely organized as far as military discipline and all that sort. See, most of us were rank and file trade unions and things of that sort. We didn't take to authority too well in the beginning. No saluting and no spit and polish, no protocol or anything of that sort. They taught us how to march, more or less. We were rather ragged, but we did get some sort of formation, and it worked pretty well.
In February, the Americans were tapped for battle in the Jarama Valley. Their orders: keep Franco from choking off the last open road, the lifeline to Madrid. They were short on training, short on weapons. Mel Anderson, a former steelworker, had just arrived in Spain.
I didn't have any training. We stopped on the way up to the front and fired, got to fire 5 shots into the hillside. That was our military training. And then we were loaded back on the trucks and on up to the front.
They may have been ill-trained and ill-equipped, but they had spirit and they could sing.
Oh, the Lincoln Battalion by cracky, a bunch of brave bozos, so wacky. They held down the line for months at a time against Franco, he'll do his lackey. Yippee-yi-yi, there is a sweet cookhouse not far away, where we get sweet demos 3 times a day. When you're there on that fire, y Franco se va paseo, y Franco se va paseo.
At Jarama, 550 Americans fought from and lived in trenches with the other international brigades. A major assault was ordered on February 27th. It was as ill-conceived, badly led, quixotic, and heroic as the charge of the Light Brigade in the Crimean War. These guys didn't even have horses. John Tisa, a former factory worker and writer, was in the front lines.
That day we were promised firepower on the left and on the right, a tank and artillery support. And when we went over, there was nothing there on the left or right, from the air, from the rear. And the machine gun crossfire from those positions that were looking down upon us from the fascist side was so murderous that no matter where you moved or how you moved, bullets kept hitting the ground, smashing into it and smashing into, in my case, it hit my rifle right in my hand and broke it in half. I had no rifle. I had no helmet.
The fire was absolutely withering. And I got out, maybe within about 100 yards of the fascist position, and I got hit in the leg, went down. So I started firing, so every time I got shot in the arm, and that didn't hurt too much, so I had fire again, they shot me again, and I decided to be good. I didn't shoot anymore.
The Americans and their allies from the other international brigades won the Battle of Jarama. The last road to Madrid was kept open. But on one awful day, February 27th, 127 Americans were killed, 250 wounded in the Valley of Death.
There was never enough rifles, never enough tanks, never enough artillery or anti-aircraft weapons to face the abundant materiel sent by Hitler and Mussolini.
I need to sing a song to it. The Valley of Jarama, a valley we all knew too well.
This is where we've wasted our manhood and most of our old age as well. We didn't know it at the time, but we attacked practically an impregnable position without tanks, without planes. If we had not had a Neutrality Act and an embargo here, we would have won that son of a bitch of a war. Right.
They won at Jarama that spring. Then on the Monday afternoon of April 26th, Spring died. The planes were Hitler's, the object was Terra, the target, an historic Basque town, Guernica. Bombs killed more than 1,000 of the 7,000 people, destroyed more than 3/4 of the buildings. And if art can speak, one painting screamed. Guernica. Picasso's powerful outcry against war. And yet, these crayon drawings strike just as deep. They were made by Spain's children, caught in the war between wars. Children. The natural victims of all war. Thousands, hundreds of thousands were evacuated. Many never found their way home to Spain.
They paid an enormous price, and the glory, and that's the best word I can choose, that was the Spanish people at that time, still shines for me. And their defeat, that enormous tragedy, a tragedy for all of us, still is an active wound in my heart.
And what began as a civil war over something called ideas ended as a brutal sideshow and a preview of coming attractions.
Picasso's Guernica. It expands the devastation of a city into a cry of anguish at the horror of all war. It's a huge thing. The real one is 11.5 feet by 25.5 feet. And Picasso painted it right after the bombing in about a month. One angry, boiling month. Come back to our world for some of the other legacies from a long winter and short spring of 1937.
Our world will be right back.
Give a little nibble, give a little nibble.
Wendy's asks, before you eat your next hamburger, any hamburger, taste the meat.
Give a little nibble.
Is it dry and chewy, or hot and juicy? Is it bland, or is it tasty?
Give a little nibble.
No other hamburger has Wendy's hot and juicy taste. The more you nibble others, the more you'll love Wendy's.
Fathers, sons, daughters, friends, the dreams of a nation you fought to defend.
Over the last 2 years, your donations to the Coors Veterans Memorial Scholarship Fund have helped over 1,000 sons and daughters of American veterans go to college. Look for the Coors Memorial Day display. More dreams are waiting.
And though time has passed, it's clear to see we remember.
The USS Liberty, blown out of the water 20 years ago like the USS Stark. The survivors relive their horror.
They died in an instant.
Watch 2020.
Tonight.
Welcome back to the long winter and short spring of 1937. Where did those dark Depression winters of the 30s lead? Straight to World War. Spring, as it turned out, would be a little late that decade. But in 1937, we didn't know that's what would happen. Here's more about what we didn't know would happen.
It took World War II to cure the Great Depression, but Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal had healed the wounds, bound them up with public works. The Federal Writers Project gave us Saul Bellow and John Cheever and Richard Wright. The Art Project nourished Jackson Pollock and Willem de Kooning and Ben Shahn. The photographer's work lives on. And so do the homeless, less visible now because they are poor in the midst of plenty and very much alone.
The big bands survived the Depression. Benny Goodman's even survived rock and roll. Lionel Hampton, he still plays with a band, only now it's called the Lionel Hampton Band.
Have you heard who the new patron saint of Ethiopia is? Karen Carpenter. Ah!
Shock Radio, today's version of Amateur Hour.
The success in Flint led to a nationwide wave of sit-down strikes until the sit-down was outlawed in 1939. Today, foreign competition has hurt American car makers. This month, at one of the plants in Flint that was struck 50 years ago, more than 3,000 workers will lose their jobs. Nowadays, robots can work the assembly lines 24 hours a day, and they don't need a union.
When the American Abraham Lincoln Brigade came home from the Spanish Civil War, nearly half of them stayed behind, buried in Spanish soil. And Franco, with the help of his allies, Franco won. In June of '39, Hitler decorated his Condor Legion for what they did to Spain. By that fall, Hitler was in Poland. By the next spring, Paris. 50 years later, the veterans of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade celebrated their reunion in a democratic Spain.
Well, there it is the way it was in the early part of 1937, when I had my 7th birthday. My recollections of 50 years ago are suspect, just beyond the threshold of real memory. But they're there, bred in the bone. They are why I'm a Union man. They're why I cry whenever I see the Grapes of Wrath, and why I'd rather hear Benny Goodman play the clarinet than hear a nightingale sing, and why I'll remember Joe Louis after I've forgotten Muhammad Ali. You can take a man out of his childhood, but you can't take his childhood out of a man.
A famous American writer who was 37 in 1937 went to Spain for its Civil War and wrote that American fighting men fought as well as American fighting men fought anywhere. He wrote a lot of other stuff about bravery, but he's not one of my heroes. I favor a fellow who went to California in 1937. He was 24 years old. He never carried a press pass. He did own a weapon once, and on it was written, "This machine kills fascists." And sometimes over the years, when he sat with migratory workers in the labor camps, or walked with union workers on the picket line, or stood with the out of work on the bread line, he would take out his weapon and strum it and sing these words, which were his words. "This land was made for you and me. Comes the next long winter, you keep Ernest Hemingway. I'll take Woody Guthrie every time." And so it goes. Also in the long winter and short spring of 1937,
in Duck Hill, Mississippi, 2 black men accused of murder were kidnapped and blowtorched by a mob of 200 whites. One of the blacks was then burned to death, the other shot to death.
One of the bestsellers that season was Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck.
A new Hudson Terraplane automobile cost $595.
Among the new movies, Lost Horizon, The Good Earth, and A Star is Born.
Ronald Reagan quit his job as a radio sportscaster in Des Moines, Iowa, and would soon sign a $200 a week contract with Warner Brothers.
Ray Gandolf was in the 2nd grade at Benedict Avenue School in Norwalk, Ohio. For a transcript of this broadcast, send $3 to Our World Transcripts, 2 John Street, New York, New York, 10038.
From KBAK-TV, here's a News 29 News Brief.
I'm Jerry Fiala. Coming up on Night Beat, a sad journey for a Valley family on the way to services for those killed aboard the Stark. Join us at 11 o'clock.
This Saturday night at 11:30, Cinema 29 presents Rio Lobo, starring John Wayne, brought to you in part by Country AMCG.
Get ready for the biggest sale event in history on America's #1 selling imports. It's the Nissan Super Sale. Your Balcos Nissan dealers have slashed prices on every Nissan in stock, from the complete lineup of hard-body trucks to the economical Sentras and the luxurious and powerful Maximas. You'll even get unheard-of discounts on the Pathfinder, voted 4x4 of the year. The Nissan Super Sale, on now at Nissan of Bakersfield, in the Bakersfield Auto Mall, south of White Lane, off Weibel.
Over the years, you've come to trust the name A1 Battery when it comes to dependable batteries for all of your starting needs. Well, now add the name Trojan Batteries to that list of trusted names. Yes, A1 now carries a Trojan line of top quality batteries, and put that together with A1's fast, free installation, and you can see why A1 is known by their many repeat customers as the place for the best battery deal around. And now Trojan Batteries too. Why go anywhere else? Drop by 1230 South Union across from the fairgrounds or 3502 Pierce Road today. That's A1 Battery.